Hello, everyone. Good to talk to you all. I'm just having a bit of a problem here with one account, so I'm just going to try to take care of that while we get going. So, one of the things that I find so interesting about today, what I'm going to talk about is again, this is the end of a module around digital transformation. And one of the things I've been fascinated with after covering it for over 10 years now, a decade, is what is next after digital transformation? And in particular, I'm very fascinated by all the comments about, well, it's all about these technologies. There's all these, hold on. I'm going to try to get logged in here. Hold on for a second because I can't get into. Um, Facebook, beautiful things about live streaming, right? I think today we're just going to have to try to not do Facebook for some reason. It's not working. So apologies to the Facebook users. I'll try to get this fixed for the next broadcast. So I'm going to talk today about what is going on with digital transformation, and in particular, what comes next after this. So one of the things I would love for you, first of all, to share is, of course, where you're coming from. I see some people coming in from Toronto. Let's see, we have somebody, Randall, coming from London. So thank you so much for joining. And what I'd love to have you share is what is your biggest learning from all the digital transformation work that you've been doing? We've all been doing some versions of another version of digital transformation or another. And we went through a huge one in March of 2020 when we had to go from working side by side with each other to very much of a digital environment, remote from each other. So one of the things I would love to hear from you is what have you learned over the past few years that we've been doing this whole digital transformation thing? And in particular, how are we going to move forward and think about what's next? So, and hello, Craig from Queens. Thank you so much for joining. And again, we have Mark from Edmonton. Thank you very much, Canadians. Yeah, go Canada. And so, one of the things that I find so fascinating about digital transformation is that it's going from a state, typically a state of not digital, analog. For example, we've all had to like sign forms when we are taking out a loan, like a mortgage or buying a car, form after form after form. And one digital transformation has been to go to electronic signatures. So we're no longer going to sign on paper, we're going to sign electronically, sometimes online, sometimes with our phones. And that's one type of digital transformation. There are also other ones, such as, no, I just can't get onto Facebook. Okay, sorry, just keep getting alerts coming in from there. And so one of the things that we try to do with digital transformation is can be these point solutions, but it could also be large or huge platform transformations. And last week I talked about the need for a transformation management office because these transformations are multi-year, they go across the enterprise, and they're big, huge initiatives to really change and have the business go through a transformation. The issue, and I raised this last week, is that we oftentimes think of this as having an end. And this has been out there for quite a while, which is that what's next after digital transformation is more transformation. And some people will call this, for example, I have some notes here, the dynamic enterprise, or Gartner coined something a few years ago called the continuous next. Accenture calls it the post-digital era. And the idea is that we're not going to think about digital as something different and new and separate from our core businesses. It is just going to be ingrained in everything. So we won't be going through so much of a digital transformation with an end date, but we're going to be going through a continuous transformation. And I think the way to think about this, and this is a core part of my research, is to think that, if anything that we've learned from the pandemic, it's that you never know where the next change is going to come from. It could be a huge external force like the pandemic and COVID, but it also could be something small, really innocuous and on the side. For example, new employees wanting to work in a different way. And they're just coming in slowly, generations coming up, for example, who want to work in a different way. And that's going to force change. So this is the fundamental idea behind what is next after digital transformation. Because that's been hard. We've had to change so many things. My point here is that we're going to have to keep changing because the world keeps changing around us. And so, what we need to build into our organizations is fundamentally the ability to continuously change. And it'll be new technologies that come. But more importantly, our customers are going to change, consumers are going to change, businesses are going to change. The employees who work inside our organizations are going to change. Our suppliers and partnerships, supply chain. Look at the supply chain mess that's out there today. That is going to continue to change. And very importantly, all the environmental aspects of things, the community aspects of the fact that we as businesses and organizations work inside of communities, society, environment, sustainability, all those things are constantly changing too. So it's interesting that businesses in general are geared towards stability and the status quo. Leadership is all about managing to expectations, managing to a status of stability. Everything we do is to go towards order and stability. The things that we do are not geared towards change and continuous change. That's not the way we typically run businesses. It's not the way that we've been trained as leaders. And my point here is that if we want to be ready for any type of change, if you want to be adaptable, be able to continuously change, to be dynamic, then we have to prepare our organizations and ourselves, our strategies, everything geared and oriented towards change. And the most important aspect of this, I believe, is culture. And if you've seen the work that I do, it is very much based on culture. So the type of culture that you have allows you to deal with that change. So if everything in your culture is geared towards the status quo, geared towards order and stability, the ability to do change is going to be very difficult. So what I'm going to do next after I look at some comments here is to look at how are the ways that we can actually create that and the type of transformation we need to be focused on going into the future. This is what's next after digital transformation, because we've learned to change thanks to digital transformation. Now it's time to ingrain that ability to change deeply into our DNA as organizations, into our processes, into our leadership, into our culture, into our strategies, so that we can take on anything that comes our way. All right, we've got lots of comments here. I want to say hello to Luis from Rio de Janeiro, one of my favorite places in Brazil. And Mark has this to share about what his biggest learning, that is not about the technology, it's about the people. A model like the 7S McKinsey model is a frame now thinking EDE, future customer back. Mark, we are talking the same exact language here. I talk about the need to look at the future customer and then work your way back. That's the foundation of your strategy. Couldn't have said it better, Mark. Thank you for that comment. That holistic model, that 7S strategy approach that McKinsey has had for decades is absolutely fantastic. Don't ask me to quote all the 7S's right now, but it is a fantastic model. And I thank you so much for sharing that. Jay has this great comment. Biggest learning is that the customer was right in expressing their needs and the company's ability to meet and exceed that need. Again, very similar to what Mark is saying, Jay. And what I like about what you're saying here is that their expression of the needs has always been there. Our ability as organizations to hear them and to reflect back to them what they have said is the key part. And exceeding those needs and expectations is absolutely crucial too. So thank you for those learnings, and hello to Hans, who's coming in from Germany, and also Ricardo from Mexico City. Quite the international group today. So I'd like to go on and share just a little bit more about just how to actually do this. If you know me, I can't just put out a theory out there and not say, this is how to do it. So I broke it down into one key area, alignment around what the strategy is. And again, focus on that future customer that Mark and Jay were talking about. And then also the 5 ways to actually understand those needs and interpret them back into your organization. Build them into your DNA of the organization so that no matter where those customers go, you'll be able to reach them. So, one of the things that I think is so important is really understanding, first of all, that alignment. Alignment is really making sure that everyone in the organization knows where you are heading, knows how you're going to get there, which is your strategy and their role in it. I've talked about these 3 questions that every single person in your organization should be able to answer. The first one is, who is our future customer? Who are we trying to serve? And who are we actually going to, how do we have a holistic view of who that person is? And again, it could be multiple people, but I find so often that each department, each business unit, each group has a different view of who that customer is. And that can't work if you're all trying to pull in the same direction. So be super clear about who that future customer is, and can everybody in your organization tell you who they are? The second is, can everybody talk about the strategy of how we're going to get there from today to the future? And the third is, does each person know deeply and understand how they are contributing to that strategy? Is it reflected in their dashboard? Is it in their metrics of success and the definitions of success? So when you have the alignment, what you can then do is be flexible, because if the needs of that future customer change, you know your strategy changes, and then the activities that you do as an individual also change with that. And that is the fundamental core. Now, there are some other very specific things that you can build into the capabilities of an organization. And I'm just going to go through them very quickly. So, the first one is being able to sense, to be able to see where that future customer is. I think it has that every single person or not meeting a goal. So hopefully I just came back. So if I just miss, I'm going to recap. It's sensing and being able to see where the future customer is coming from. And the second capability is the ability and the freedom to experiment, to take these observations and test to see, is it real? Is it not? Is it going to actually create, can we actually create a better experience for these customers? Can we meet their needs? Is that need even real? The third one is then being able to escalate and to triage, to prioritize, make choices, because you can't do everything. You can't do anything, but you can't do everything. So being able to collect all these experiments that are happening all throughout the organization, all this research that people are doing, and they have freedom to go and try, and then bring them in to places where these decisions can be made. And cultural processes like disagree and commit, which I am a huge fan of. How can we really advocate for 2 completely different approaches and points of view? And then when a decision is made, be 100% behind it, even if it's not the idea that you're advocating for. That is a very important and very difficult thing to build into your culture, because that notion, that commitment to, again, that alignment, what the strategy is, and being able to step back from your own ideas and embrace a decision that wasn't yours is an extremely difficult thing to do. And then once that decision is made, then you go into scaling it throughout the entire organization. How quickly can you make a change happen once you've decided the change needs to happen? Does it take weeks and months, or can it happen literally in days or even hours? And that scaling is all built on an ability to change, processes for change. So your processes are built and wired to create that change. And the last and very important part is the sunsetting. Because if you're going to constantly change, it means you're going to do new things. but it also means you're going to stop doing old things because these things that we were doing in the past, these products, these services, these internal processes, no longer serve the needs of these future customers. So, do we have a process to sunset these things? Do we have a process to understand when things have come to a natural time in their end? And very importantly, do we have a way to communicate to the people who are working there far in advance to give them notice so that they can retrain, find new positions internally, or we can help find them their next position and truly invest in their future too, as well? When you have this holistic way of thinking about how to create change, then when you think about it supporting your digital transformation today, it will also support any type of change you have going into the future. So I think what we oftentimes call digital transformation, we're actually talking about a business transformation, a company transformation to be able to take on anything that comes up to us, that any challenge that comes that we can be prepared for to take on. And we saw this in the pandemic. Some organizations were incredibly well prepared to deal with the challenges that COVID did. I see in my research that there are some companies that just constantly go through change over and over again. They disrupt themselves over and over again without seemingly any blips whatsoever. And my research has just come down to these are some core capabilities that they have. Everything that they do is geared towards that change, geared towards going quickly and very quickly chasing after that future customer. So I just have a couple other hellos to see, and then want to really open it up to any questions that you may have about what I put out there. Does it ring true? Does it resonate? Does it not? And I also encourage you to really ask and send me your questions in general. So I'm on every possible social media channel there is. You can do that. You can always email me at charlene@charlenelee.com. And I'm happy to take some of those questions, and something I'll be doing in my live stream starting next year is spending some time each week answering questions from you all. So think of it as an opportunity to ask me anything, truly anything, and I'll do my best to answer them. So a couple other shout outs to people. We have here Randall says culture mindset uh, for the win. What's agile thinking, data driven, and forward looking? These are the key learnings that Randall has seen from his experience with digital transformation. So I love that. I especially love the agile thinking way of thinking about constantly improving and working towards that change, and that forward looking and basing on data in particular rather than gut. Hello, Priya from Nepal, Rohit coming in from India. And let's see, Ricardo has an interesting comment here. Key after digital transformation or any other large initiatives is top leadership commitment and involvement to be the new culture, walk the talk and lead the change. I couldn't agree with you more, Ricardo, because I take a huge uh, piece of my work focusing on leadership and the leadership of the change and transformation. And when it's not there, when it's seen as a project being managed around a technology, it just doesn't go very far without that commitment from the leadership to say, this is why we're going on this. This is why we're doing this. It's a difficult thing, and it's important for these reasons, because that's what leaders do. Leaders create change, and they lead that change. They make the case for it, and they advocate for it, and they create a movement around it. So thank you for sharing that. And then also Ricardo is sharing this interesting thing about the lean trilogy. I haven't heard about this. Employees, the associates, customers, the ones that purchase your product, and then the shareholders, the organization itself, and the goal. So the lean trilogy is interesting, thinking about the lean startup, lean organizations, leaning into that. And I love that, Ricardo. It's a great reminder for us to remember all of these different constituents that we serve, these stakeholders. I would add to that, again, some of my research is looking at two other key stakeholders, the ones that are inside of your suppliers and partnerships, shareholders, as those stakeholders, but also the broader community and also the environment, other things that are outside of the organization. Because if we don't invest in those and understand what impact we don't or do have on those, then we aren't necessarily planning for the long term. So those are all good things to keep in mind. And again, I think it just points to just how complex our world is. And that any of these stakeholders, our customers, our employees, our shareholders, our supply chain and partnerships, and then the ecosystems, and then also our communities and our environments, are any of those places can be the source of change and disruption, and we need to be ready to be able to deal with that. So that's what I have for today. I apologize for the many technical difficulties we're having today. I'm not quite sure what's in the air and the water today. I think it's just I'm going to chalk it up to being in the vortex or the solstice or something like that. So again, thank you for that. I do want to just point you towards a couple quick resources. I do have a new podcast out called The New Rules of Disruption, and I'll have all 10 episodes of the first season are out published now. And I'll have new episodes featuring guest interviews starting in January. And then just a reminder, send me your questions. I would love to be able to answer them on air. And I'm taking some time off, some much needed time off. So I'll be streaming again on Tuesday, January 4th at a slightly different time at 10 o'clock West Coast time, 1 o'clock. It should be 1 o'clock Eastern time. I didn't change that, but 1 o'clock Eastern time. And one of the things I'll be talking about then are the priorities for 2022. Just a tip on that. I really hate doing predictions because it's one of the things about predictions is like, okay, so what do you do with a prediction? I'd rather focus on the priorities that are based on the predictions. So what do you do based on what I think is happening? What are the big changes coming down? So we'll talk about the priorities for 2022. And now is not the time to be thinking about them here in December in some ways. This is a time to consolidate, to look at what's happened over the past year, really gather together the thoughts and reflect. And then as we're doing that, think about what the priorities should be going into the new year, where we're going to have a lot more energy to be focused on that. So again, please stay in touch over the next few weeks. I encourage you to send me your questions again. I really want to hear from you and make this much more of a dialogue too going into the new year. Thank you again so much. I wish you all the best as the year ends up and closes up. I hope you get some time to celebrate, reflect, spend time with family and friends, and I'll see you in the new year. Take care.